this lesson, you will learn how to describe a Venn diagram. A Venn diagram got its name after the British mathematician John Venn. In a Venn diagram, you see circles. Information or numbers inside these circles are called elements. One such circle with elements is called a set. A Venn diagram usually has 2 or 3 sets. The circles or sets in the diagram are usually interlaced. That means they are joined like this. These connecting parts of the diagram are called intersections. What can you say about the color inside the intersection? Yes, it is a mixture of the two colors. That gives you an idea. Venn diagrams are based on these mixtures of elements. Now look at this Venn diagram. You see several intersections in this Venn diagram. Look at the intersection in the middle. It is called a triple intersection. Sometimes there can be elements outside the circles. They do not belong to any of the circles. And there is a rectangle bordering the circles or sets. Together with the rectangle, this is called a universal set. Now let's look at a Venn diagram with all its elements. I am going to show you how to describe this Venn diagram. First, read the question carefully. There are 40 students in Situm's class. He conducted a survey in his class to find out about the different kinds of storybooks his classmates would like to read. He recorded the data in the following Venn diagram. Write a paragraph describing it. Look at the underlined phrases in the question. Kinds of storybooks, like to read. These phrases will help you when you describe the Venn diagram. Shall we start? This yellow set shows the students who like detective stories, and the orange set shows the students who like to read folk tales, and the green set is for students who like adventure stories. Look at the yellow section. It has an unmixed yellow color and do not have any intersection in it. So, it shows that 5 pupils like to read detective stories only. Here, we use the word only to show that it is unmixed. So, we can say 5 students like to read detective stories only. Now you can say about other unmixed elements too. 2 students like to read adventure stories only. 1 student likes to read folk tales only. Now look at the intersections among sets. They belong to both the sets. So we can say about it like this. 17 students like to read detective stories and folk tales. Let's try to say about the other intersections now. 12 students like to read adventure stories and folk tales. 6 students like to read detective stories and adventure stories. This section is common to both detective stories and folk tales, but it has no any connection with the adventure story set. That means this section shows pupils who like to read detective stories and folk tales only. We use and only when describing this section. Let's say about it. 14 students like to read detective stories and folk tales only. 9 students like to read adventure stories and folk tales only. 3 students like to read detective stories and adventure stories only. Look at this section. It has all the elements in both detective story set and folktale set. The pupils inside these sets like at least one of the two types of these stories. So, the 35 children inside this section like either detective stories or folktales. Let's say about this section using the conjunction O. 35 students like to read detective stories or folktales. 32 students like to read adventure stories or folktales. 41 students like to read detective stories or adventure stories. Now look at the triple intersection in the middle of the diagram. The children in this section like all the three types of books. Shall we say about it? 3 students like to read all the three types of books. What can you say about these 3 students? They do not belong to any of the 3 sets. So, we can say 3 students do not like to read any of these books.